Join me today as I sit down with Mary Terhune as she shares about her multiple expanded consciousness experiences. Stay tuned for a direct word-for-word message that she brought back for humanity from one of her experiences.
So back in 1984, I went through a big crisis in my life where I was losing everything. Everything that I had built before was gone. Relationships, my ideas about the world. When I had a spiritual awakening, I lost all my money. I lost my house. I lost my job eventually. But what I regained was my divinity. And so this is how it happened. I'll tell my story of how it happened. At the time, I owned a home with some other people. And for some reason, it was time for me to wake up. And there was one moment where I just said to the world, I just want to be happy, because I recognized I wasn't happy. And my relationships were not working. And finally, I called out to whatever to help me work with whatever was going on inside me. And I knew I had to make a change. I knew I had to leave this environment. And in selling my house, I ended up losing all my money because I didn't get a lawyer for myself. And so therefore, I ended up being thrown into a lot of debt and losing everything. And people who I thought were friends betrayed me. This is an old story, right? And there was one, and at that time, I had an 11-year-old daughter that I had to support. It wasn't just me. And I had been divorced for a number of years. And it reached such a climax in me. I was in so much fear and so much dread about my life. What was I going to do? Here I was thrown into this debt. How was I going to handle this? And the fear was so powerful, it took me over like nothing before. And I started crying. I started crying to the depths of my soul, so much so. And I cried out and said, please, God, let me die. This is too much. I can't take it. And in that moment, all of a sudden, my mind stopped. And I couldn't think one more fearful thought. A lot of people are going through this now. There's so much fear. People can't think one more fearful thought. And in that moment, as soon as my mind stopped, and I was sobbing so deeply, I was giving it all up. I was giving all of it up, everything that happened. And in that moment when my mind stopped, as I was falling into this deep abyss internally, I was falling and falling and falling and falling, and I didn't care where I was going falling. I didn't care if I died. I didn't care about anything. It was just falling and falling. All of a sudden, everything stopped, and light entered the window and began speaking to me. Now, mind you, I was not religious. I was not following some spiritual path. I didn't even know what a spiritual path was back then. And all I can tell you is this light had so much peace in it that and was so powerful that I had to lay down on the couch. And then it began speaking to me 7 revelations. And the first one was about forgiveness. The next one was about judgment, the Bible, on weight and emotions, because I was a registered nurse at the time working in a major hospital, on disease, aging, and the ego. I was an RN at this time working at a major hospital in research administration. At the same time, I was in my 3rd year of massage school, ready to graduate and help people with sports injuries and stress and all of that. So I was, with this light coming in and speaking to me, I recognized the voice. And the voice was that of the Master Jesus. Now, not connected with any religion, but just a being who was of the light, speaking the truth. And as he ignited the Kundalini energy in my body, the energy that rests, my spiritual energy that rests at the bottom of our spine, and he awakened it so that all the chakras were spinning in my body. I could feel these spinning wheels of the chakras in my body. And I had heard of this in massage school, but I didn't really know what it was or what it was about. And now I was living the truth of it. All these chakras were spinning in my body, and all of a sudden, the tremendous bliss that arose from that was astonishing to me. And I knew somehow whatever this was the truth. I didn't have the words for it then, but I knew it was true. And this light just poured through me and poured out of me, and the bliss was phenomenal. And as he spoke all of these lessons, he would give me an experience of each lesson that he was speaking to me. And I think one of the two big ones that I want to talk about, or maybe three, there's so much. One of them was about the Bible. And he said, now do you see how they misuse my words in the Bible and use them against each other? And I could feel his grief over that. And it made me cry. That was one of the things that he spoke about. And on the ego was a big one. That was the last one he spoke about. And he said the ego, all that the ego is that you've identified yourself as a body and as a job and as a separate person from everything. That is the ego. It's a false identity. It's not who you are. I knew it was the truth, but I didn't quite know how to relate the light and the love and the bliss to all of that. But I would learn over time because I would have many experiences of this. And at the end, when I went through all this whole process with him as he was speaking this truth, he came to the third eye right here and he removed a veil from my third eye. When this finished, there's so much I could say about it. There's more in the book. I described everything in the book. And so I want to talk about other things. When that was finished and the light withdrew from the window, the love pouring through me, this divine unfettered love that had nothing to do with romantic love. It loved because his nature was love. And it was pouring through me and out of me. And I went to the back door to go outside to get some fresh air. And when I opened the door, all that I saw were these packets of light around everything, around the trees, humming around the trees, especially this apple tree that sat there. And these packets of light, I understood that somehow these packets of light created everything. And they were filled with omniscience and filled with intelligence and filled with so much love and bliss that I was overwhelmed by it. And I said out loud to the universe, oh my God, this is paradise, but we have created something else, which had me sobbing all over again because I saw how we were destroying each other out of the ego, out of this separation and fear. And I had to change. I could no longer be part of any of that. And when I went back and laid down and cried from seeing what we have done, and it was a time to wake up, and I wondered, why isn't anybody talking about this bliss? Why isn't anyone talking about this light? Now, mind you, I had a job I had to go to. And here I am, in this state of immense bliss. And all I wanted to do was to sort of be like Eckhart Tolle and sit on a bench and just watch the world go by, watch the phantasmagoria of the world go by. That's all I wanted to do. That's all I felt capable of doing. But I had to go to work. So when I went to work, part of my job was working with numbers. And I sat down, I couldn't do it. Nothing made sense to me. And I'm trying to focus on numbers. Meanwhile, the bliss is just pouring out of me. And I was in love with everybody and everything. And I remember traveling up the elevator with some of the doctors, and they were making fun of acupuncture and making fun of all of this and making fun of others. And I thought, why are you behaving like this? Can't you see the truth at all? That there's only this love in the world, and we're it. So it took me a very, very long time to deal with this for months. And the light pouring in me was so powerful that whatever got activated here, it was like dripping honey, so that I was completely filled with the light, eating the light. It was feeding my soul. So that I went down to 100 pounds. So I was very thin, but I was very full of the light. And then I realized whatever was removed here in this third eye, I came to understand this later on, that I could see beyond the veil of the egoic structure, which is built from here down. I said a prayer. I said, please, I need to find somebody living now, some awakened soul who understands what I went through, so I can talk to them about it, because I have so much more to learn. And I need someone who's living in a human body who's gone through this to help me understand it all. When I said that prayer, finally, after 2 years, 1986, I went to a talk on energy medicine. And I thought, energy medicine, yeah, that sounds right. Because I wanted to know someone who could understand. All I could relate the light to was Einstein's theory of relativity, E equals mc squared. And I thought, maybe if I could find someone who understood that, then I could understand what I was going through and why everyone around me seems oblivious to it. But here I am living some sort of a truth. So there were various people on the board on this panel speaking about energy medicine. One was a doctor talking about acupuncture. Somebody else talked about something else. And the very last person stood up. And he didn't introduce himself the way other people did. He stood up and said, E equals mc squared, Einstein's theory of relativity. And I thought, that's the person I have to meet. So he was an energy healer. So I went up to him afterwards, and I said, I have to see you. And in fact, I have to make an appointment right now. You can't leave without me making an appointment with you. So I did. And I went to his office, and I went inside his office, and he said, excuse me for just a minute. I have to do something. I'll be right back. And I noticed something on his wall was a picture. And it was a picture, what it looked like a monk. And the picture came alive, which sounds odd, but when I want to tell you, when these things happen to you, it just seems like part of truth. So the picture came alive, and she spoke to me, and she said, we're coming together again to complete something. And she showed me like a little film strip that I had been a monk of hers in a past life. But somehow, whatever work needed to be completed then was interrupted, and I could no longer be with the teacher. So I'm looking at this, and I'm like, this is it. These are the eyes. Those eyes are clear. They're connected to something, and I want whatever that is. So the healer walked back into the room, and I said, is that a monk? And he goes, yeah. And I go, is she alive? And he goes, yes. And I go, and he goes, you want to meet her? She'll be here in 2 weeks. And I'm like, whoa, okay. So when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So when I didn't realize at the time, when I looked into those eyes, the very same thing happened to me as what happened with Jesus. My Kundalini got awakened even more. So I was laying on the table, and what was a 1-hour session turned into a 6-hour session. And I had all this light streaming through my hands, all this meridians in my body. I could see all those filled with light coming out my feet. And I was sobbing and sobbing all the grief of 1,000 lifetimes and my life, and clearing out everything. Because what I would learn is that when the Kundalini gets awakened, it clears up all the chakras of all the issues that you've been carrying for ages and ages, to finally free you of that egoic separate structure that is lived from here down. Here down is the egoic structure. It's built on the foundation of fear. Fear is the foundation of the ego. It makes you think you're a separate person, that all you have is a body, that everyone's an enemy. You have to get what you got to get for you, that it's, there's envy, jealousy, hatred of others, and that this is life. So what I came to understand was that when the Kundalini gets awakened, it will absolutely cause a dissolution of your life that you built it on that ego. All the structures in the world, people are going through this now, all the structures in the world built on ego will not be able to stand, because the light of divinity is so powerful in us and wants to shine through now to create an entirely different landscape, completely. So I met this teacher, and I spent time with her. Not just me. There were many, many others who did. And through her being with her, through someone who was enlightened, clearly enlightened, and being able to hold it, they call them ascended masters. Jesus, of course, is an ascended master. His energy lives not as a separate body, but as a consciousness. We call this consciousness Christ consciousness. Others call it Brahman. It's all the same thing. It's not about a person or a personality. It's about a state of consciousness. So when I met this teacher, I learned a lot about the Kundalini and understanding it. But more importantly, I was given an experience of complete self-realization. Even though I couldn't hold it for 30 minutes, I got to experience it. And I was sitting at meditation grounds, and I was reading a book by Alice Bailey about the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, speaking about the soul must go into the driver's seat now, and the ego has to rescind, has to go back. The soul must drive the vehicle now. And I thought, oh, I want that. Wonder what that would be like. I would like that to happen to me. And in that moment, as I said those words, all of a sudden, the Kundalini began to arise again, and it opened up this field that came over me of so much power and so much glory and so much light that it began to, as I connected with it, my entire Kundalini began to wrap up in me. The story of Mary as a separate human being started to kind of roll up like a scroll of my life as Mary. All the issues as the separate person as Mary began to roll up and take everything in its wake. And it reached this point again, right here, the third eye. And in here, this third eye is where you can't pass this third eye with fear. You can't pass it. You can't fool your way through it. You have had to let go of everything. So it had to have this gatekeeper here that keeps the gate closed until you're ready. I got permission from that gate, and all of a sudden my energy just opened up to this chakra up here, and the light of 1,000 suns opened and exploded into light. I was light. And the words that came out of me were, I am that I am, Aham Brahmasmi. I am Brahman, and all this is my creation. And I knew this was the truth of humanity. I knew this was the ascension that Jesus and all the sages, he wasn't the only sage. There were many sages, and there still are sages who speak of this time in humanity. Jesus was particularly well known by the world, of course, but there are others not as well known, but they're still present. And so in this moment, as I'm having this glorious experience being delivered from fear, what I found was I had absolutely no fear. Fear was gone. Need was gone. The need to be supported by others was gone. I was that. I am that I am. And I happened to be outside, so I looked up, and above this building, I saw a cloud. And who was standing in it but Jesus, with his hands rising up. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I thought, am I ascending too? Oh, is this the ascension we're to make? The one inside us, not leaving the body, keeping the body, and instilling this divinity on earth, because this earth is built on love, and only love is going to survive it, because that's what's eternal, and so are we. In this moment, all my ideas of humanity, all my ideas of me, all my ideas of anything, concepts, constructs, were shattered completely. And I thought, oh my God, thank God I've made it out of ego existence. I don't have to suffer anymore in it, because this is suffering. And everyone is suffering in fear. Everybody. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the one generating the fear or you're the one experiencing the fear. It's fear. And it's destructive, because it's not the truth. It's our false self. that wants everything for us, but not for you. I was elated. I thought, finally, I made it safe out of it. And I was so delighted. And, when you're at a meditation retreat, you're expected to take part, to clean up things or serve food. And I had signed up to do dishes. And here I was in this magnanimous state. And I looked out and I saw people walking by. And what I saw were their souls, like Christmas lights over them, twinkled right on their bodies, just like this. And I saw their soul, it hovered right here. It's like this, just like that sun right there, right over them. And I wanted to shout out, look up. There's your soul. There it is. Look up at it. But I knew I couldn't shout that. And I saw that their mind had them wrapped in fear and stories as a separate person, that it was wrapped in that. But the light was the truth. And if you just go for that, at some point, you will be delivered from all this separative thinking about being a separate soul and thinking people are your enemy, But it's the ego is very powerful because we've lived it on this earth for so long in the ego construct that we really, really think that's our life. And it feels like you're going to die if you give it up.
I recently had a session with Sarah K. Grace, the paramedic psychic, to have my energy field deep cleaned and tuned. Throughout the session, Sarah treated me with value, care, and respect. With my permission, Sarah read my energy field, and she was able to read in my field details of my life that I had not told her, and there was no way that she could have known. I truly believe that this session contributed to a shift in consciousness for me, helping me to get free of limiting beliefs and get into the flow with life. Sarah is the real deal. Book a session with her today at sarahkgrace.com. The link is here or in the description. Thank you to Sarah for partnering with me in this video.
Well, remember that day when I said, please God, just let me die? It was the death of the ego. And that's what I was feeling, like I was dying. I felt literally like I was dying because I, the Mary separative, was dying to the lie, this separative lie. It has nothing to do with religion. This has to do with divinity. This was here before religion was invented or created. So I saw this over people, and I was in this moment, and I had to go do the dishes. So when you're in this realized state, you don't stop doing things on the earth. You still partake of life, but in a whole different way. And so here I am in this, so grateful that I'm free. I'm finally free from fear. And when I went into the dish room, it was a huge dish room, and there was, dishes and things flying and, in the air, and it's soap suds and people. And so I put on my little thing and my gloves, and I stood in front of this bin filled with soap suds and dishes. And I thought, I wonder how this affects other people. And just as I looked up, this woman happened to look at me right in my eyes, and she burst into tears. And I realized what I was feeling and seeing got ignited in her. And that when that happens, why do you sob and cry? It's those are tears of reunion with your true self and the letting go of the fake. So I looked down at my soap suds again, finished my dishes, and I went to leave the building. As I went to leave the building, somebody asked me a question. And I noticed at that point, oh my God, fear. Fear is slipping back in. And I left the building and I wanted to sob like never before. I had to go back. I had to go back into the story. I had to go back into the separation. It wasn't time for me to be able to hold this. I had to go back and experience whatever issues I still had that had to be cleared and experienced out. And there were many, many issues, relationship issues. I had to experience a lot through my body, karmas. I had a major heart attack. I died of a heart attack. I came back. I experienced my own death. only to find that you can't die because you're an eternal being. Only the body drops away, which was never alive to begin with. So when I experienced that full state of, they call it self-realization, you can call it Christ consciousness or Brahman, whatever you want to call it. In that moment, I could see the light surrounding my body and my arms, and the flesh had no life of its own, other than that consciousness that was giving it life and giving it force. And in that moment of self-realization, I received a message for humanity, which is the message right now that I was to deliver so many years later. I knew I couldn't speak of these things until really speak them now. And the message that I was given for humanity, for myself, was, here is your divinity, the divinity that awaits all mankind. Your soul wants full expression now. This is the presence. This is the living presence. This is living. This is real. If people can hold on to that and know absolutely beyond any shadow of a doubt that that is the truth. I lived it. I was given it. It's true. You can't die. You're eternal beings. I had my own experience that I share in my book as well. You cannot die. You are eternal. And when you leave, what do you take with you? Your consciousness. The very thing that has penetrated these systems, the very thing that's in the chakras. That's what that's all about. That's all consciousness. It's divinity itself entering the physical body, making it appear alive. And now it's time to go beyond the egoic structures that we have built and try to keep building, but they won't stand. Why? Because the way things are created on this earth, we create them from our consciousness. And if your consciousness is living in egoic structure, in hate, fear, and division, you're going to create structures that reflect that. But when you're in this state of divine truth and power and bliss and eternity, you create systems that will reflect that consciousness. This is why no matter what you see that's being built on fear, division, cannot stand. Why? Because humanity is awakening to this now and claiming it. This is ours. And this is true for everyone. I don't care what side of an issue you stand on. This is true for everyone. And you can either choose this or you can choose more suffering. It's our choice. You hold the key to love and fear all in your trembling hand. That's a song, right? Why things are changing and collapsing across the entire world. Why? Because they're built on that. And so we are sort of going through, not sort of, we are going through the dark night of the soul, where I went into crying that one day during my crisis when I just fell into this abyss of darkness, and light came up and saved me, just like that. So the other thing, because, I was trained as a nurse, I came many years later, I would be suffering from a bad thyroid, and I couldn't take the drugs because the drugs made me sick. So I thought, well, I got to find a better way, because I know that everything that we suffer from has an mental emotional foundation of it. And so I said a prayer, and I said, you've got to show me somebody who can help me to understand this, not only help me understand it, but cure it. And I asked for that very directly. The very next day I went to work and mentioned this to a colleague. She turned around, handing me a flyer. And she said, well, then you're going to need homeopathic medicine. I go, homeopathic medicine? I go, okay. And I knew that this was the answer. But, when you ask the question from the pureness of your heart, you will be given an answer. Be open to that answer. Immediately, I called the nurse. This was a nurse who was also a homeopath. I immediately called her on a dial phone. Yes, a dial phone. Remember those? I said, I have to make an appointment with you. So I made an appointment with her, and she sent me some forms to fill out. And they were unlike any other forms I'd ever filled out for my health. And one of the things she had me do before I came in was to write a timeline of every never well since event I've experienced in my life. Like, I was never well since I left that school. I was never well since I took that injection or that medication. I was never well since I got married. I was never well since I got divorced. I was never well since I moved. Never since my dog died. All these never well since events. And she said, include your in utero event with your mother. My mother, thankfully, was still alive. So I called her up and I said, Mom, by the way, did any difficult event happen when you were pregnant with me? And she goes, oh, yes. Like, okay. And she said, when I was 8 months pregnant with you, my mother died. And my mother was my very best friend. She was the total support in my life. So when she died, I felt I had no support whatsoever. No nurturance, nothing. So that state of mind was laid on me and that energy of it. So I was born into grief. I was born from grief and into grief. And as I looked at my timeline, all of that was filled with grief of relationships. All of it. Unfulfilling relationships. No support, lack, no nurturance. All of it was built in that way. And so, of course, I reported this all to the nurse homeopath. And she goes, yeah, I know the remedy. And I found out what the remedy was. The remedy was nat mure, table salt, but it's homeopathic. You take table salt and you highly dilute it and succuss it and triturate it down so that there's no molecules in it, but just the consciousness of the state of lack of nurturance. And one of the states of mind is the death of the mother. So the death of nurturance in your life. So I went home, I took the remedy, 1 teaspoon of it was in water. As I'm standing at the sink kitchen, I put it in my mouth. Immediately, my entire consciousness leaves my body, goes into the universe. And what I saw was this little twinkling light, a little twinkling star. And it was this. And I go, oh, that's where my consciousness is stuck, in this grief. And then another twinkling star. Oh, that's the remedy. And they come together and they meet and explode. I go back into my body and I went, oh, that's like cures like. The foundation of homeopathic medicine works with the consciousness of humanity where we are stuck in our grief. Grief is a big one. And disappointments because we don't know how to process it out. I reflected on the time 14 years prior when Jesus spoke to me about disease and he said, it's all energetic. I didn't quite understand it. I mean, I knew it was the truth, but like, what do I do with that knowledge? How do we work with it? And I found homeopathic medicine. And I said, I reported this back to the nurse homeopath. And I said, I have to study this. She goes, well, you're in luck because in 3 months, one of the greatest homeopaths a doctor who's going to come to Boston and train people. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. And so I began to study that and have it. And I tell stories about how I've used it for my own family and friends. And at this point, I was in my mid-50s and I wasn't about to start, nor could I afford to start my own homeopathic practice, but I knew that I could help family and friends. And I also knew that I could teach people about it, how to use remedies to help themselves in these acute moments. And so that's what I embarked upon. So many other things happened after that. There's so much to share, but I do put everything that I could possibly put into this book that's coming out to help support humanity at this time of tremendous fear as we go through this dark night of the soul and give birth to ourselves, reclaiming our divinity. It belongs to us. It is us. There's no God and us. There's only divinity. There's no separate object subject. We are that. And one thing that people can do that might be helpful to them as we're going through this fearful process of birthing into the light, you can repeat, I am that I am. And anytime the fear comes up, just say, I am that I am. Don't engage in it. Try not to engage in the fear that's being generated. Try to stay away from televisions. Try to stay away from anything that doesn't speak of this light. Form light coalitions. Be with people who know this truth and are working on themselves to regain this connection and release all of that, because this keeps you stuck in it, and reactions out of fear keep you stuck in it. And the ego really loves to try to be right about something. And that only keeps you stuck, because right and wrong are going to disappear. And all that will be, and all that is actually now, is the light of one's divine nature. This world belongs to divinity. It is us. We are creating it. This is the earth of love. And we are coming back to restoring this truth. What will happen? I don't know. What kind of structures will be created? I don't know. Homeopathy is one of them. That I know. And it can work alongside of trauma medicine. We need to have them both as we go through this journey. So we'll need less drugs and more. We're more curing out the disharmonies in us, but we need the support. We have to have both of them working together. It's sort of like the masculine principle of, being aggressive with your health and with through drugs, and the feminine principle of curative and preventative, both of them working together and having the wisdom to know when to use what. It's not about shutting one down. It's about opening up to other things. It's about opening up, expanding other things. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you so much for sharing. When you had your expanded consciousness state, and then you realized that you had to come back in to the body and work out, I think you said the karmas that you have in the body.
Yes.
Do you have any advice for people on how we can clear out those issues so that we can get to the point of holding that higher consciousness state?
Well, again, one of them is to turn away from division and reclaim by saying, I am that I am, or I am, or just I am, to repeat that phrase, or whatever phrase will hook you up to the truth of the light. You can meditate, you can do yoga, you can take walks in nature, and try not to engage. I know it's difficult because the ego likes to engage in, if someone's nasty to you, you want to be nasty back 100-fold. That is the trick of the ego. And anytime you turn to that, that just brings you down again. And just when you fall off your horse and do that, say, okay, I am that I am. Don't engage. It takes so much inner strength to not engage.
If you could give one message to everyone on the planet, what would it be?
Believe in your divinity that awaits all mankind. It's right at your doorstep.
Mary is an author and homeopathic teacher, and you can find her link to her website in the description, where you can order her book or sign up for one of her classes. You'll also find in the description my link to my membership community, Love Covered Life Sanctuary. We are in the middle of doing our Joe Dispenza style meditation challenge. If you missed it, it's not too late. I'd love to have you join us. Thank you for watching. Now go live your most extravagantly loving life.